The detail is in the reports that are before you, from the deliberations, the methodology of informing those deliberations, and the feedback and the responses that helped shape the proposed alcohol policy. Finally, I would like to thank my fellow panel members, Councillors Penrose, Wood, Crum and Member Wilcox, for their work and diligence. The work and professionalism dedicated to this policy by our staff has been exemplary. The sheer volume and complexity of the material has necessitated a Herculean effort, expert knowledge and a real focus. There were some seriously long candles burnt by our staff during this work. Our thanks to all the staff involved, but particularly to Belinda Hanson and Rebecca Turner for the work that they put in and the real focus they brought, and to Mike Sinclair for his astute guidance and judgment. To our legal team, Richard Harker, and to Andrea for her work from the Democracy Services who kept us all organised and on the front foot. A sincere and genuine appreciation to all our staff for this work and this endeavour. Mr Chairman, I would move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Cashmore. Is there a seconded Councillor Penrose? Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. I am declaring a conflict of interest in regards to the adoption of it, and I wanted that noted. And the conflict, Chair, as I confirmed with our officers, is the fact that I'm still a sworn police officer, and as a result, I will declare that conflict of interest.
Thank you. So I think if there's any questions, we'll have questions of the officers, or the officers will probably answer those questions, and then we'll move into debate. So are there any questions on the policy? Councillor Brewer.
Thank you. We all know that the intent, the statutory intent of the 2012 Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act was all around harm minimising, and I just wondered what evidence were we relying on around off licences being closed, particularly at 9 p.m, and I'm particularly thinking of supermarkets here. The motivation for this question, Mr. Chairman, is around, you know, are we on thick ice if any of the big boys try for an appeal as far as the evidence that we have used, the empirical evidence we have used to prove that closing off supermarket sales from 9 p.m. and before 9 a.m. will in fact reduce harm.
Well, just before you answer that question, I'd just like to put a caveat around that, in that there are, I think, 6,000 pages of submissions, and you know there's a huge amount of written material in those submissions. So to quantify it won't be that easy, because the officers can answer it in the best way they can. Yeah.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, to answer your question, Councillor Brewer, probably when we're at this stage in the process getting to questions around the rationale for decisions of the panel, it may be more appropriate for the panel to answer those questions as it was their recommendations that are being put today. However, from an officer perspective, we do have evidence to show that reducing trading hours at off licences can help to reduce alcohol-related harm. We have specific Auckland evidence that shows that alcohol-related crime data peaks from 9 p.m. through to 1 p.m. 1 a.m. We've also looked at various aspects like the sales data of supermarkets and weighed that into the equation to consider how it would impact on supermarkets as stakeholders. And as Councillor Wood rightly pointed out, we have taken into account a lot of feedback that we received through the submissions process. We received over 2,600 submissions, so that has been a big part of the equation as well. But I'll leave it to the panel to comment specifically on their recommendations that are being put today.
Okay.
Well, just on that, Mr. Chair, certainly some clarification, because as we all know, the draft LAP that was signed off for public consultation promoted 10 p.m. For off-licence hours, and I suppose I want to be sure that we're not going to be funding an army of lawyers when we've now gone against that initial draft LAP recommendation of 10 p.m. to 9 p.m. As to whether we've got the empirical evidence, the anecdotal evidence, and all our ducks lined up to prove that 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. is in fact a danger zone.
Well, Councillor Brewer, I think one of the first points that you'd have to start at would be the fact that the ALA, the Alcohol Review Authority, they, in the Wellington case, they seem to put more store on the local, wasn't empirical evidence to the extent that you're talking about, but the evidence that organisations such as the police and the hospital authorities and other organisations that are working in this area had, because the ALA said that the international experience may not transpose into the local situation. So for us to start talking about international evidence is a difficult one. And I think, you know, the panel made their decision after considering the evidence and written evidence and the evidence from the numerous people that appeared before us and at different locations across Auckland. So that's how we kind of built up a picture of for a number of issues, and then we had to make decisions on after that in relation to ours and those considerations. But Councillor Cashmore might have something further there as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chairman. You're quite correct in saying the evidence, especially the presentations over those days that we had, there were many people impassioned about the hours of alcohol and the correlation to alcohol-related harm. The other things we considered were the consistency, and we felt it was important for the off-licence industry that there was consistency and we weren't picking one set of winners over another. We also considered the inconvenience factors as someone who's on shift work, and, you know, is it going to be inconvenient for them to have to wait another day to go and buy their bottle of wine or whatever. But we think that Kiwis are actually more organised than that, and they, by reducing these hours just by a slight amount, potentially will reduce partially the alcohol-related poor decision-making that can occur after people have already started drinking, and also will help reduce harm because of that area. So, as in all things, there is that balance, but by reducing the hours, we are helping their aim to reduce alcohol-related harm.
Thank you. Councillor Crum, did you wish to add to that?
Not that specific topic, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman,
okay.
but some general
Okay.
comments,
Councillor,
if I
well,
may.
just Councillor Brewer, is that?
No, I accept what's been said.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crum?
Thank you, Mr.
You had
Chairman.
a question, is it?
No, are you on comments or
Well,
still questions?
we haven't got on to... Are there any other questions? Okay, well, we're into the debate. Maybe, I think Councillor Cashmore's probably led it off. Have you got anything else to say before you... Okay, well, Councillor Crum, if you wish to come in now, then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it was a pleasure to be on this particular hearings panel. As Councillor Cashmore has pointed out, it was a huge quantum of work. And speaking personally, it was for us as panellists, but nothing close to what it was for staff. So I too convey my sincere and hearty thanks for the many, many, many long hours and blood, sweat and tears that was put into this. And for, as a helpful tool, I'd point out to my colleagues attachment D, this particular paper that the team put together, such as the likes were from the psychoactive substance LAPP body of work. So it's a really helpful chart that shows at quick glance what some of the tweaks were, what some of the wholesale changes were. So a very, very handy tool, and thank you again for putting that material together. It was a pleasure to listen to many, many, many submitters of very wide and very different groups over a very long period of time. I thank my fellow panellists for their good humour along the way. There were some variations in our approaches and the way that we viewed different parts of the proposal, and I'd like to point out, just for posterity's sake, my difference to the panel, my sole difference to the panel in regards to supermarket opening hours, and acknowledge the 91 comments requesting an earlier opening time for off licences and specifically supermarkets. The national default time, Mr Chairman, is 7 a.m. Our draft proposal was 9 a.m. and my proposal was a happy medium of 8 a.m. opening times for supermarkets. That was not met with support from my fellow panellists, and the numbers will have to, and have, spoken for themselves, but I still think that was a decision that could have been undertaken differently. Alcohol harm is not prevalent between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. and I think it was reasonable to allow supermarket sales from 8 a.m. Notwithstanding, there has been a very good body of work, and I think that where we've arrived at in terms of everything else has been something in which I support. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers? Well, just following on from Councillor Crum, I just want to really mention the fact that this new Act, the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012, supersedes the Sale of Liquor Act 1989, which really, to my way of thinking, seems to be a very short period of time between when the new Liberalisation Act came in 1989 to the fact now that in 2012 we brought in a new Act, which I think it took about 4 years in deliberations and making. It came out as the Alcohol Reform Bill, and that was subject of submissions from Auckland Council, and really it really came from Auckland, the start of this change that from some horrific kind of happenings over alcohol, where the Law Commission did a pretty comprehensive review and came up with these changes. So, you know, and you've only got to look at the objects and purpose of this new Act, which are completely different from what was in the objects of the Sale of Liquor Act 1989. So, you know, the council, it's been devolved down to the council for us to take a far greater responsibility in the administration of the alcohol in its widest sense. And we now have district licensing committees which make the decisions as to whether licences are granted. So there's a huge responsibility now placed on the council. So the council, we heard the submissions from, as the officers say, 2,600 submissions were put in. A lot of them were on the council, from the council website, where they just filled in the details there, and there wasn't a lot of narrative in the document. But others were very extensive in what they said about the impact of alcohol and the downstream problems that alcohol causes in our community. And you know, I think some of the most telling submissions were from people at the coalface dealing with the aftermath of alcohol, overindulgence of alcohol. And I remember one medical officer who had been working in Auckland in an emergency department, but now resides in the South Island, decided to come all the way back to Auckland to make a submission, to amplify her submission in relation to the horrific, you know, problems that are caused in the early hours of the morning after people have been out drinking and overindulging in alcohol. So, you know, we've heard people from right across the region, but, you know, people who have to put up and had to put up with the downside of alcohol, especially in the Auckland city centre here. And that was one area that, you know, I think there has been some improvements over over recent years, and the fact that the default hours are now 4 a.m. closing have probably had some impact on those problems from previous years. So I think that we've reached a reasonable happy medium here, and I think this is a policy that will have the desired effect in various ways, as long as we administer it as a council and all the other organisations that come into play in relation to the overall administration of the Act play their part. But it really also needs community support from across the board. So I think that there was in relation to off licences, there was I think evidence to show that from the submissions that people do want to see uniformity in the way this is administered, and to make some licences at this stage different in relation to their opening hours to others on off licences wasn't what many people wanted when you looked at the submissions. So I think, councillors, this is a good start, and it obviously now if people, as Councillor Brewer says, people want to appeal the policy, there is that safeguard with the ALA reviews or appeals. Thank you. Councillor Cashmore?
Yeah, I'd like some, with your indulgences, some concluding comments, but perhaps first,
Mr. Wilcox.
I was going to ask if Belinda would perhaps explain the process from here so everyone understands what can and cannot happen from this point on.
Thank you, Councillor Cashmore. Through you, Mr. Chair. So if the committee decides to adopt the policy today, then we will go ahead and give public notice of that adoption, and that will be made early next week. And then from the date of public adoption, public notification, there'll be a 30-day period within which submitters on the draft local alcohol policy will be able to lodge appeals with the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority. So depending on whether or not any appeals are lodged, that will determine the next steps from there. So if appeals are lodged, then we will be in the hands of Ministry of Justice in terms of the scheduling of any appeal hearings, and those will be heard by the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority, who will determine whether an element that's appealed against, an element of the policy, they will determine whether that is considered to be reasonable in light of the object of the Act. If the ALA determines that an aspect is not reasonable in light of the object of the Act, then it will be put back to the council to reconsider that particular element, and that will need to come back through the committee for determination. If there are no appeals, then we come back to the governing body seeking a commencement date, and then we have our final local alcohol policy coming into force at a date specified by the governing body. And there are some transitional provisions within the Act that specify that certain parts of the policy need to take longer to come into force. So any changes to trading hours, for example, need to take an additional 3 months before they can come into force, to make sure that licensees have time to prepare.
Thank you. Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think first of all, I'd like to echo the sentiments expressed by the other panel members to thank the staff. I mean, it's been fantastic. This was a big piece of work, and there's been many hours of reading, and so I expect there's been many more hours of writing and coming to this and getting things like this, of which there are hundreds of them done. So a big thank you to you and the staff. I suppose for me, being on the panel, I came to the panel with an open mind, but having read through the submissions, there seems to be a trend, and there was evidence that backed the statements that many of the submitters were making. We read papers from Norway, the UK, Australia and New Zealand evidencing all of these, actually backing up a lot of submissions. And also, there were things within the draft that we did take out, like the single sales, because we found that that just complicated the matter, like the one-way door policy, because that once again complicated the matter. And towards the end, I was looking for simplification of the rules so that our community and our retailers and our wholesalers and our people that were in the industry, as well as those outside, could understand clearly a way forward and a way that ensured that alcohol was sold in a safer environment, minimised harm for the community. So I've been quite happy with what we've come forward with. If people aren't happy, I mean, they're quite right, they have that right to appeal to ALA, and that is their prerogative. But also I wanted a simplification because I wanted the DLCs to know where they sat when they were making decisions, and that the community could understand these decisions. So I'm quite happy with that. I've seen the evidence, read the submissions. I don't know how many I've read. I've lost track now because I've read them all, and sometimes it gets a bit boring. But I have to say that the best thing about it was understanding how everybody thought about it. This is not only a technical subject, it's also quite an emotive subject. And for all of us, alcohol has a special place, whether it's rightly or wrongly. Often many don't like alcohol, often many do, and then we have the problems that are caused by unfortunately bad consumption habits, and so that's what the purpose of this LAP is. I'm quite happy with it. I'd like to thank you, Chair, for having chaired us and guided us through this process. It wasn't easy, and often we had different ideas and different thoughts, but it was basically narrowing all these thoughts down and these to focus on what was essentially required of us from the Act. So thank you.
Councillor Brewer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I want to congratulate the committee as well and the work that they've done as far as really improving the draft LAP as we put out for public consultation and being prepared to listen. I, for one, in my years in Newmarket, fought a proliferation of bottle stores, and as we know, we could only, under the old laws, argue around the hours of operating and the character of the applicant. And so the news of the 2012 Sale and Supply Act coming into force and its determination to minimise harm and also give local communities meaningful input was welcome relief to many, not just residential communities and groups, but also business communities too, that were sick of cheap and nasty bottle stores setting up as they did with proliferation over many of the last 20 odd years. So overall, this, from my perspective, is really heading in the right direction. And on the on-licence provisions, I'm certainly pleased that we've stuck with the default setting of 4 a.m. I think that's, I know it's not ideal from a policing point of view, but it has been a big improvement from the 24-hour licensing and all the problems it resulted, and I know that the CBD has cleaned up subsequently. I was concerned that some of our town centres that we're promoting as lively, potentially some of the metropolitan centres and places to live, work and play, were having to face under the proposed draft a 1 o'clock closing for on licences, and for places like Parnell, Takapuna, Newmarket and the likes, that was quite a tough proposition, and I thought a backward proposition. To drop that broad area B and to set it at 3 a.m. I think is a really good outcome for the community and for business, and to also focus really focus on those priority overlay areas too is a great initiative. Off licences, Again, my issue is largely around whether this will in fact reduce alcohol harm as is in the statutory intent of the legislation, and that is off licences 9 a.m. To 9 p.m. And as Councillor Crum has articulated, from my personal perspective, I hope it helps, but I don't see, particularly in those well-regulated, well-lit, with a lot of community policing going on at the same time inside those supermarkets in our suburban neighbourhoods, that anyone buying alcohol before 9 a.m. and after 9 p.m. are the main problem in this country at a supermarket level. For me, Mr. Chair, I suppose it's someone who went through university in the early 1990s and the alcohol sections were roped off on a Sunday, and you had to buy food with alcohol if you were daring to drink on a Sunday. To me, this step is a little bit back to the future. I can see the overall intent of it, but I can see that it's also an inconvenience by those busy people, the mums and dads, if you like, that are going supermarket shopping before 9 a.m. or after 9 p.m. And I also see it as, I can hear the chairman of the working committee saying that, this cleans it up as far as a universal policy. It's very easily understood, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. But it's a blunt instrument, I would also argue, for those that are really good operators and that have no blemishes on their licences. And perhaps if we'd put the 8 a.m. to 10 p.m, those good operators could operate at those hours, and the local impact reports and licence renewal process might have made it more restricted for any of those operators that had blemishes on their record. So, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a really positive step forward from where it was. I would like to support it in its entirety. I don't know if the recommendations allow for us to start picking it to bits, but I do have reservations that we are picking on the off licences who have got exemplary records and their customers, who I believe, many of which are not the problem that we're trying to solve here. And so I hope that we can see the statistics starting to improve when we start roping off our supermarkets at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning and after 9 o'clock at night. But I fear that is more around being seen to do something other than actually having an impact and actually delivering on the Sale and Supply Alcohol Act's purpose, statutory purpose, which was around harm minimisation. But I hope that certainly works. Just finally, Mr. Chair, another blunt instrument I see is the 2-year freeze. I understand, and a lot of work's been done on identifying the priority overlay areas, but a 2-year freeze for licences in the city centre, particularly off licences. And I know that buying alcohol from a decent bottle store from a bad bottle store doesn't necessarily result in a different effect, but I just see that as, again, a very blunt instrument, that if we're trying to develop in and around the waterfront, building apartments, building a hotel, and a really smart boutique wine shop selling Central Otago Pinot Noir has to wait out the freeze, then that seems a blunt instrument when I know that the target is probably more around containing the proliferation of the dozen bottle stores that we've seen up on Karangahape Road in the last 20 years. So again, the 2-year freeze in the centre city is a blunt instrument, but I hope it does certainly help with the intent of the Act. Thank you.
Councillor Casey.
I just want to congratulate everybody for a job well done, and just mention one particular aspect of the policy that I know myself and Albert Eden Roscoe and many local boards will be welcoming, and that is the changes to the regulation, location and density of new off licences and the renewals of off licences. In Mount Albert we had a bit of a victory and we stopped one. But it was a massive exercise. It involved protest, It involved petitions, involved a whole day in court for up to 20 members of the community. This should make it easier, and I know that other local boards have not been so successful in trying to stop off licences. So this will be welcomed by local boards, and I hope that it makes our city a much safer place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, Councillor
Chair?
Kerr. Yes,
Yeah, it'd be remiss of me not to say something, Mr. Chair, so I will. This has been a long process, as we know, and I'll start from the early days, Mr. Chair, when you and I spent a lot of hours on the streets of Auckland, for the right reasons.
Sounds interesting.
For the right reasons. Not the red light district, no. And as we've gone through this journey with our team, and then to put in place the LAP. And I just want to acknowledge our chair, because some people would have said at the time, if we might have had a bit of a conflict, Mr. Chair, in regards to it. But I just want to acknowledge the chair. Bill, you've done a damn good job, mate. And I want to acknowledge my panel members. It's been a long, hard journey and difficult at times. And I want to acknowledge the local boards too. They've done a really good job coming in behind us. A really good job. But I want to say one thing in particular. And that is, it's not often I go out and say I'm an Auckland councillor. Sometimes around this table I wonder why the hell I am an Auckland councillor. But today, it makes me very proud to be an Auckland councillor, because we've got some awesome staff. Awesome staff. Mike and the team, Belinda and Rebecca, you've been outstanding. Damn outstanding. We couldn't have done it without you. The hours and the times and the sleepless nights you've had to put into this has been unbelievable. So if people of Auckland think we're taking this lightly, they've got another thing coming. So, ladies, gents, thank you. Just where we've ended up, I think we've ended up in a really, really good spot. And why I say that is because we don't want to be party poopers. We don't want to stop the city and the vitality of Auckland growing. But at the same time, we've got to reduce alcohol harm. And I think we've done that. We've landed in a really good spot. I've heard from the off licences, I've heard from some of the the supermarkets, I've heard from the on licences. But what the off licences have said to me, actual fact, Callum, we'd like to be closed on Sundays. Why don't you shut us on Sundays? But they open Sundays because the competition's down the road. They're happy to have 6 days a week. We've reduced their hours to 84 hours a week. And I think that's pretty damn good. But what they have said to us is, if it's good enough for us, it's good enough for everybody. So you've got to keep us all on the same playing field. Supermarkets and off-licence, keep us on the same playing field, and we'll be all happy. In regards to our licences, I think we've landed in a pretty good spot there too. We've defined the CBD by the motorways, Councillor Wood, excellent. We've also separated it into 2 areas. The CBD and Auckland. What would have been confusing if we said metropolitan towns, local town centres, town centres? It would have been absolutely diabolical. So we've actually landed in a good spot where we've said the CBD of Auckland 4 a.m, the underlying areas 3 a.m. But that doesn't give them an automatic right of a 3 a.m. closing. And I think this is where people got to realise. It depends on their resource consent. It depends on what the DLCs implement. So, there's a lot of our bars across the region, and in particular the south, north and west, where they're open 1 a.m, 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. And they've got a licence at 3 a.m, but they generally shut around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, or when their patronage is not there. So we're going to be realistic about it. And to me, it's about the direction I was coming from was to reduce alcohol harm, in particular our off licences and our on licences, is about in establishments. I would rather people drink in establishments, good licensed premises, where one would think that's where people feel safe and a safe environment to be drinking in. Not on our backyards, not on our beaches and our reserves, not in our driveways, not in our carports, but in a good licensed establishment where they're in a controlled environment. To me, this is where we've landed. For us to do the opposite and cut them back to the 12 o'clock, some people said we should be shutting on licence at midnight, 1 o'clock. To me, that's ludicrous, because all we're going to do is push people out into our streets. We're going to make it unsafe for people. Yes, the police might say we should be doing 3 a.m. But again, it goes back to people will party regardless. Life goes on, the world changes. If we get too restrictive, people rebel. And I think, again, these hours are pretty damn good for them. It gives people a chance and the opportunity. But also, in particular, for the outlying areas like that far place, I think, called Franklin, and one up there in Rodney. I look at Councillor Cashmore when I say that. I know the board chairs from Franklin here today. But there's not a window of opportunity for people to drive into the CBD of Auckland and drink driving. We're trying to mitigate that. They've only got half an hour, really, a window of opportunity to come to the CBD of Auckland. So to me, we're reducing alcohol harm there as well, keeping people off our roads. But to me, it's about the DLCs, empowering the DLCs to do the job for us and do the work for us. You know, we've really put it, the buck stops with them. The 3 strikes policy and the CPOs. That's where the weight is. The 3 strikes and the CPOs, Councillor Wood. They are working. And it's up to us as a collective around this table to make sure that our units are doing their job. I know very well the CPOs out south are doing an outstanding job. And we've had licences revoked. We've had premises closed down. They are working, councillors. The freeze, to me, this is about getting this passed today, getting through the next 30 days, 20 odd 30 days, and getting it implemented. And why I say that? Because in my area, the South Auckland South, the proliferation of off licences is unbelievable. The quicker we get the freeze process put in place, we will restrict that. We will stop that from happening. So to me, that's us being good operators. So Mr Chair, again, I just want to acknowledge the team. I want to acknowledge everyone that's been involved in this process. And our staff, man, awesome. Thank you.
Just to clarify, the CPO is a controlled purchase operation. Is that
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, there was a question raised in relation to the freeze in the city centre. Can you just clarify what licences that's going to apply to, please?
Through you, Mr Chair. So the freeze in the CBD only applies to off licences. It does not apply to on licences for that 2-year period.
Correct.
Thank you. Right, any other speakers? Right, Councillor Cashmore, do you want to have a right of reply?
Thank you, Mr Chair. So, councillors, you've heard from a lot of the panel members this morning, and this process has been long, and it needed to be that, to be thorough and comprehensive and to be inclusive. And when you actually looked at the matrix of all the different items and different decision-making points, it was pretty complicated. There was lots of interdependencies. It wasn't just 1 or 2 levers you could pull. There were huge numbers of levers. And for some of those, there were good responses, others there were not so good responses, and they did mirror and reflect one another. So there was that balancing act to try and move forward. The other thing we were recognising, very cognizant of, is the fact that as a city, we are changing, and changing very, very fast. It's not just about population growth, it's about the maturity of the drinking culture. We're all far too young to remember the 6 o'clock swill, but we've probably heard about it from our grandfathers. And the last thing anyone would ever think about doing is going back to that sort of days. But the maturity of the way people behave these days, the sophistication of how people enjoy their after hours, we need to be able to accommodate, and that's what we were comprehensively trying to achieve that, at the same time ensuring that it was done in a responsible manner that was as safe as possible to try and mitigate that alcohol-related harm. The off licences have been an area of contention right throughout the city. There is a strong public will to see more regulation and to see a greater enforcement, and that's going to have to be done through our licensing people. So this policy, we believe, is as comprehensive as we can make it. It's as complete as we could have made it. And I just want to thank the panel members and the staff for the work that was put in. And we believe it's in a good place, and we urge you to support it to its next stages. Thank you, Mr Chair.
That was the right reply. what was the issue, Mr. Councillor Lee?
I want to speak very briefly, Mr. Chairman, in defence of the 6 o'clock swill. I won't take long, but there is an assumption that in those days we were all very uncivilised, and now that we have completely liberalised drinking laws and rules, we're very civilised. Well, actually, all you need to do is correlate the crime statistics from the bad old uncivilised 6 o'clock swill days with the present civilised ones, and maybe you need to think again about how uncivilised those restrictions were. I'm not saying we should go back, but, you know, let's not get into a cliche that it was all uncivilised in those days, and with liberalisation of drinking rules, we're very civilised. We are not yet. So I'll just make that point.
Well, with that, I'll take the vote. We'll do it by the division.
Far too young to remember the 6 o'clock swill, Michael.
Councillor O'Neill?
Illegal drinker.
Councillor Brewer?
No.
Councillor Casey?
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore?
Yes.
Councillor Fletcher?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hulse?
Aye.
Councillor Crum?
For.
Councillor Lee?
I'll abstain.
Member MacDonald?
Yes.
Good work.
Councillor Penrose?
Yes.
Councillor Quacks?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Sir John Walker? Councillor Wayne Walker?
Yes.
Member Wilcox?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, my forebears would be proud.
Carried 14-1.
14-1, thank you. Declare it carried. Thank you very much.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. Thanks to the officers. Thanks to the public. Thank you.
Special
We now move to item 10.
We'll issue a special licence for you, you can make Premco 6.
And this is the Wirri Prison
But you know the point, there is a point there, right?
Social Impact Fund Allocations Committee. Warwick, you're here to guide us through this. Thank you very much, Warwick.
Population will actually change a lot of demographics.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, councillors. This matter is really a procedural matter. The Board of Inquiry, which looked into the setting up of the men's prison at Wirri, made a number of recommendations. Those recommendations included a community impact forum, which would look at some of the impacts on the community of the correction facilities in the area, and make recommendations ultimately to a social impact funding allocation committee, which would distribute funding in relation to the recommendations from the community impact forum. The membership of the Social Impact Funding Allocation Committee includes 2 members to be nominated by Auckland Council. Because it is such of local interest, in the previous term, a subcommittee of the equivalent of this committee in the previous term was set up, which had local boards appointed to it. And we're recommending that we go with the same process again this year, set up a subcommittee which has local boards appointed to it, a couple of councillors from the southern wards, which the meeting today will need to appoint, and then that subcommittee will decide on the 2 appointments to the Social Impact Fund Allocations Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, a question, and I just want to table the fact that I will be interested in being one of the councillors on this particular committee, Chair. Yeah. But Warwick, it's the word ad hoc is the question. What's the meaning of ad hoc subcommittee? To me, it just means a subcommittee that's just there for the sake of ticking the box. So that's the question.
Bit of jargon. It's a committee which isn't a standing committee. It's formed for the single purpose of making these nominations, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Single purpose is better.
So, Councillor Anai?
Look, I'm
Korea or Latin.
totally like Alpha, I'd like to be on this as well,
It's
but
like-
the fact is,
And then go again.
a lot of work we've done with this by the communities out there, wanting to make sure they've been protected with having this prison out there. So this is a good move, and we should be supporting it. And
Thank you.
if possible, I'd like to go on that.
Councillor Casey?
I'd like to move that councillors Philippina and I be the representatives on that ad hoc subcommittee. Is it up to 3? Is it? Two.
No? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Filippine.
I'm just saying that I think having the 2 ward councillors from the Manukau ward, one would be better, and then with Manurewa, and the councillor for Manurewa may be the better fit
Yeah, okay.
in regards to that, Chair.
I'm happy with the way it is.
No, on that basis, I'll withdraw
Well,
on
then,
the
and
comment.
I'll change my amendment to councillor Philippina and councillor Penrose.
Okay, well, it sounds like you're on it, Councillor Penrose. So, is there any other speakers? Okay, it's moved by Councillor Casey.
Yep.
Oh, Mr Wilcox, sorry.
Yeah, just need some clarification. Note that the Independent Mayoral Board has the right to make 2 additional appointments. So are you asking that we do make the appointments, or are you just noting it?
Through you, Mr Chair. The provision in the previous term on the subcommittee was for 1 appointment from the IMSB, but in fact the legislation allows the IMSB to make up to 2 appointments to committees that deal with the management and stewardship of natural and physical resources.
So I think that'll have to be an administrative decision by IMSB.
It's up to you.
I mean, I think it's not our prerogative to be making those decisions, Mr Wilcox.
So then I'm taking it that, well, there's no need to note it, it's just to say,
Well, no,
make.
we're just noting it as a committee.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then you want us to go back and
Yeah,
make the point. Okay, thank you.
All right then, no other speakers? Okay, with that, who seconded it? Yep. Seconded by Councillor Filippina. Okay, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against, declare that carried. We now move to item 11.
Reserve verification.
This came back from last month, I think, is it? Yeah.
Good morning, Mr Chair, councillors. Just before I get into any questions, just to note that we have brought this report back from last time. It was approved in respect of James Fletcher Drive. It was approved in principle for reserve revocation and reserve revocation and disposal. It was agreed in principle by the governing body, as there were some questions about if the proceeds of any sale should default to the Crown. We had that clarified, and they do not default to the Crown. Due to that, we just wanted to make sure there was certainty before we undertook any statutory process, such as the reserve revocation process. So we've brought it back to this committee. We've also got another property here, which is adjacent to 18 Pine Road. It's in Orewa. It's a drainage reserve, very similar circumstances, and that is up for decision making today as well.
Okay, Councillor Filippina,
Just move it.
Move it?
Yep,
Happy seeing
because the local board, as reported earlier, is very supportive around the Otahuhu one.
Okay, so
And the number 4 paragraph covers off on what we're talking about, any statutory requirements, so happy to move.
okay, so you seconded Councillor Penrose. Any discussion?
Question?
Question?
I noticed in your attachment A, in the RFR on the property information, RFR provisions contained in the Mana Whenua Tamaki Makaurau Collective Redress 2014 do not apply. This is on page 141 of ours, in your attachment.
Yeah.
Can you that's right, they don't.
Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
So I notice in your attachment A, in your report regarding the RFR provisions on the property information, part 5.
Part 5? Yes?
Citing the Tamaki Collective Redress Act.
Yes.
You're quite right, they do not apply But do the ones north, I mean, Tamaki Makaurau Redress Act only applies south of the...
I've been informed that no RFR provisions apply in these circumstances.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is why are we talking about the Tamaki Redress Act in this decision? Because actually this would come more under the Ngāti Manuhiri and Kaipara Settlement Acts. There are now 4 settlement acts in Auckland. I mean, this is a little bit erroneous. I mean, it's most like saying the Ngaitahu Redress Act doesn't apply in Orewa. Of course it doesn't apply, neither does Tāmaki.
This was the information that was provided to me. As I advised last time I was here, we are advised by Auckland Council on everything we need to be mindful of, any issues that we do need to work through. This is the advice that I received. I can go back and double check anything. It is always easier if I actually receive any information in advance because we don't hold the property files. So what the position that we're in is we're advised by Auckland Council. If there's anything that we need to seek specialist advice on, we go away and do that. We don't know what to look for if we're not advised by Auckland Council because we don't have the property files, but we haven't been advised of anything.
So then, Chair, is this an issue with our council? Because, I mean, the Tāmaki Collective Act don't go further north than the Mason-Dixon line, which is at Okura. So, I mean, this is an issue here because this is erroneous information that we don't need.
Mr. Wilcox, I mean, you're raising issues now at this meeting, which I wish you'd had raised them before the meeting because we talked about this last month. The office has been, Auckland Council Property Limited have been dealing with Auckland Council, and they're told that it seems to be in order what's happening here. So if you can show the evidence or show there is some justification, maybe you've got a case. But at this late time, we're relying on what we've had in the papers here, really.
That's right. I'm not. The recommendations are fine. It's not about the recommendations, Chair. It's about the information that Auckland Council properties are receiving from Auckland Council, because that's incorrect. Well, it isn't incorrect, but it's really. Why should we be talking about that?
So, Member Wilcox, I'll undertake just to have a look at how we're framing both the question but also the advice that we give, and so that we don't end up either. It sounds like we don't have erroneous information, but we could be either over or understating some of the facts. It feels that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So can I take that on board? I think that we'll have that discussion with ACPL, but we might actually also take it up directly with you because you're aware of and sensitive to this issue, and we want to make sure that we get it more right.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the pathway forward.
And can I just note as well that we did have a specialist advisor in the reserve revocation process actually look through both of these properties. They provided us with independent advice. That was someone outside of council. And again, this was the advice that I received from them.
Yeah, that's right. It's not your fault.
I think that's accepted. We just need to sort of unpack some of these issues a little bit and have a look at them and just make sure we're asking and answering the right question and we're not under or overstating. So I don't think there's any doubt around the quality of what you've got. It's just quite how we're terming that.
And for any of the governing body members, if there are any questions that you have in advance, I'm always happy to receive them before the committee meeting, so I've got time to get specialist and technical advice before coming to the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any questions? Councillor Penrose?
I did have my hand up there before, Mr. Chair,
sorry.
and you've actually answered the question. What we do try, and other committees, Mr. Chair, is that we try, and in particular the CCO one, where you may mention that you didn't have the property files on hand to get that relevant information, is to email through. When we say we get it, and when we get agendas 5 days in advance, normally, just to flick an email through and just to clarify a few pointed concerns.
Okay. All right. With no other discussion, I'll put the motion. It's moved by Councillor Philippine, and seconded by Councillor Penrose. Put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Against? I declare that carried. Thank you.
Thank
now
you.
we thank you. We usually go to the Auckland Development Committee, don't you? so you don't have to worry about this committee.
Finance and performance normally.
So we now move to item 12, and this is for information, the update on the Manukau City Council prostitution in public specified places bill, smoke-free policy, and attachment of the summary of local board implementation of smoke-free policy. So those three items for information. I'll move that the
I'll second.
information be received, seconded by Councillor Casey. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
To the contrary? No. No one to the contrary? I'll declare that carried. Thank you.
Well done, Chair.
And that is the end of the meeting. And just for...
Well done.
Sorry?
Oh, so this...
Yep, that's it. Come on, do-
We've got a workshop though, haven't we? Yeah.
what workshop? That's it,
Standing
1
Got a
o'clock.
workshop.
Standing orders one is 1
Close
o'clock.
the meeting. Thank you.
Can't we bring that forward?
I don't know.